Hey viewers, my name's Cara. You're watching my personal channel, CuteWitch772, and this video, as most of my videos are, is sponsored by my lovely patrons on patreon.com. If you want to become one of my favorite people in the world and sponsor my videos that I make here on YouTube, you can go to patreon.com/CuteWitch772 to find out all of the exclusive goodies that you get if you do so and choose your own amount of support and stuff like that. The link is in the description to my videos. This video is going to be a response to a comment that I got recently that addresses a lot of really common misunderstandings or misconceptions about Wicca and witchcraft. And since it is now officially September, it's not exactly fall yet, but I live in Northeast Ohio and it's already starting to get cool and start to feel like autumn. I have already started drinking pumpkin spice tea and wearing my ugly Halloween sweater, which isn't ugly at all, but is gorgeous and I love it. So it is a perfect time to start talking about witches and other witchy stuff, as though I don't talk about that all the time because that's what I do. So I just got this comment recently, and it's literally, it could be any comment in the world because so many people say these things. And I just thought, you know, this is kind of a perfectly concise comment of a bunch of these misconceptions. I'm just going to make a video addressing it. So what I did was I actually deleted the comment from the video itself so that nobody would be tempted to argue with this person or reply or feed the trolls at all in this situation, which, by the way, I kind of hate that term because it's really derogatory toward trolls. Like, there's a lot of trolls who are much more well-behaved, who would not just, like, be mean to people on the internet, okay? I have to say. Sorry, trolls. But this person, like I said, could be anybody. So I deleted it so we don't know who the exact person is, and all I have here is the text that I copy and pasted, and I'm going to be putting things up on the screen for you. And I'm just going to go through this point by point. I broke up their comment into different points, and we're just going to have a little discussion about it, about Wicca and witchcraft. So if you want to cozy up with a mug of coffee or tea or cider or whatever your beverage of choice is, water, drink more water, definitely drink more water. I have a giant mug of blueberry black tea and a very appropriate mug. So here we go. The comment begins. Wicca is actually not, capital letters, not an ancient religion. So I'm going to stop right there and address this first comment. We know that. Okay? Newsflash, everyone who likes to say this to Wiccans, we know that. There are sort of two things that could be happening when people say this. The first thing, which does happen but is less likely, actually, I think is less frequent, is that there are actually people out there who maybe are just starting to learn about Wicca most of the time, or I don't know, there might be people who really profess and claim this for some reason, that there are people out there who really say that they believe that Wicca is an ancient religion. I don't think that's super common, but occasionally you do get someone saying this. Those people are mistaken. What they actually mean, and then this is what goes into the other thing that could be happening when people say this, is that they misunderstand what we mean when we describe this. That Wicca is a modern religion. It's a modern conglomeration of beliefs and practices. But those beliefs and practices have roots from pre-Christian religion and spirituality. So Wicca itself as a name, like the path that is currently, the various traditions that are currently known by the name Wicca are modern. Those became what they are now later on. But their roots go back much further. So we say that we have connections to pre-Christian religions and practices. That does not mean that we think Wicca is ancient and has been what it is now for centuries and centuries and centuries. I think it's a misunderstanding of what we mean. So, first part addressed. Second part. Okay, technically it's not a religion per se, it's more a spirituality. Alright, so there are a lot of people out there who will say that witchcraft or Wicca, which are basically the same thing, spoilers, is not a religion. There are a lot of people, I think, who shy away from the term religion because in current society, especially in the United States, but maybe also elsewhere, I don't know, I've never lived for extensive periods of time outside the United States, so I'm not sure what the overall conception is, But a lot of people, when they say religion, are really referring to Abrahamic religions, not taking into account that there are many other religions other than the big three Abrahamic ones. So there are people who shy away from the term religion because to them it means a certain type of religion that they don't agree with. But Wicca and witchcraft, the way that people practice it and the way that it is, are religions. And now some people may choose to refer to them as their spirituality and say that they're not religious but they're spiritual. That's a personal thing. But Wicca is a religion. It fits the definition. And by the way, there are more than one definition of religion. And one of them specifies like belief in a singular God, blah, blah, blah. And you can tell where they're getting that definition from. But there are broader definitions of religions because there are many, many religions that are not those top three. So Wicca is a religion. It is recognized as a religion by law in the United States, and various cases have been brought up involving that. Wicca is a religion. Quit saying that it's not. Stop. Okay? So, next point. But it's still relatively young as religions go. Wicca as a religious group has only been around since the 1940s. Parentheses, founded and phrase coined by Gerald Gardner. That's not how you spell his last name. He's not a gardener. His last name is Gardner. But anyway, first part, it's still relatively young as religions go. Not sure why people think that's a bad thing. It's okay. All religions were young at one point. All people were young at one point. That doesn't mean that you haven't grown and learned. That does not mean that the religion has not grown and expanded and changed. So I don't know why people think that being young is bad. People think that being young is bad, but people think that being really old is bad too. Like, you pretty much can only be like in your 20s or 30s anymore to be taken seriously. Like, Wicca's older than that, so what's the problem, right? You know, I don't know why people think that's a thing. But Wicca as a religious group has only been around since the 1940s. They meant 1940s. Founded and phrase coined by Gerald Gardner. That is a thing that Gardnerian scholars and scholars on the history of Wicca will be able to tell you about a little bit more. But essentially, the very basics of that is that Wicca, as we call it now, W-I-C-C-A, as the name of a religion, was not used by Gerald Gardner and the early initiates into his form of this religion of witchcraft that he put together. That term was not used by them. That came on later. Gerald used the word Wicca, W-I-C-A, and it was used a little bit differently. He referred to initiates of witchcraft and witches as being of the Wicca, W-I-C-A. And Raymond Buckland actually has interviews online talking about how when he was initiated into Gardner's group and Gardner sort of charged him with the task of bringing these new forms of the religion to America, Ray has interviews describing how they never used Wicca, W-I-C-C-A, as the name of the religion. That is something that other people saw and decided to start using because, and we're going to talk about this more in this video because it's kind of the whole point, because people don't like the term witch, and because there is such a heavy negative connotation behind it, people said, why don't we stop calling ourselves witches? Why don't we use this word Wicca instead? And so many people used it that they eventually had to give in because too many people were using it and it was starting to get confusing. And Ray Buckland, like I said, has interviews talking about that, and he would know better than I would because he was there, okay? So I tend to believe him. And yeah, so people who know way more about the history, I mean, just look up the history. You can find this information. It's not hard. Next point. Wicca, in its most modern incarnations, pick bits and pieces from the historic ancient beliefs of many cultures, i.e. Hellenic, Dionystic, Druidical, Norse, Germanic, Egyptian, and some Kabbalistic. Sorry, I never actually read that out loud until now, and I didn't realize that they used the word Druidical, and I've never heard it referred to that way. Anyway, I believe I just addressed that in the first point where I said that it's a modern religion that has beliefs and practices from ancient beliefs of different cultures. So you just agreed with my point, which shows that people are just misunderstanding what we're saying. Because this person just basically said what it is, but then is confused thinking that we think it's an ancient religion in itself. We do not. So moving on. Many cultures throughout history have had witches or linguistic equivalents. Okay, I'm with you. Next, in pretty much every one of those cultures, keep in mind these are pre-Christian cultures I'm referencing, the term witch, or whatever the identical word in a culture, was a negative term. Okay, I'm with you. In Norse Germanic culture, for example, a vulva, I don't know how to pronounce this, I am not Norse, I apologize. Said woman? Cedar woman. Or the like was not, again capital letters, not a witch. There were / are specific schools of spiritual / magical / religious working dedicated to the feminine side of the universe. Witchcraft has been, to all my research, always been associated with the woe-working side of things. But hey, it's just my almost 3 decades of study, what do I know? Alright, so there's a couple things to address here. First of all, the thing that, for example, these people are not witches, and then they said there are schools of spiritual working dedicated to the feminine side of the universe, which they seem to be offering up as like, there were these things, but it was not witchcraft. And witchcraft has always been the negative side of things. So, here's what's up. Like I just said a little bit ago, people are afraid of the word witch. There's a huge negative connotation surrounding witch, because we've been taught that it's negative and that it's all evil. A related topic is the fact that, the Bible says that witchcraft is evil. Well, there are scholarly resources online that talk about that as well, and talk about how in the original language that was used to print the Bible, we've got translation upon translation that we look at now. But in the original language, the words that they used for those passages that they used for witchcraft were words that meant magic, like negative magic that had baneful intent, like harmful or baneful intent. And examples that were given were things like destroying livestock, destroying people's crops, destroying their homes, killing people, things like that. That's a very specific type of intention and work that some people use magic for. And that is the kind of stuff that was referred to as like, this stuff is evil, don't let this happen. Obviously, people are destroying your crops, destroying your home, killing people, destroying your livelihood. That's bad stuff. I will just say there are people today who still do that, I'm sure. However, most of us do not. And so that's where the argument comes in that what was really being referred to as evil in the Bible was not witchcraft as a whole as we understand it now, where there are different things that can be done with it. It was talking about this, as this person said, to all my research, witchcraft has always been associated with the woe-working side of things. It was referring to the woe-working side of things that everyone thought was bad. Today, I like to think we're a little bit more enlightened than people were then, and we understand witchcraft as being much more expansive and encompassing a lot more than just that negative woe-working stuff that some people still choose to do. And as this person has kind of actually helped illustrate, there were people doing spiritual, magical, religious working, as they put it, that was for good. And the difference was people used different words for them. People called people who did negative things witches, and people who did positive things and healing and helping people, they were termed wise women or healers or spiritual guides, whatever. They called them different things. But now we understand they were doing the same thing. They just had different intentions. It's like how we say now, we describe that magic is magic. Magic is just magic. It is a tool that can be used for positive or negative. So I personally don't like to colorize magic, saying things like black magic, white magic, gray magic, whatever. It's magic, and your intention makes it positive or negative. And the kind of witch you are is up to you. But the term now we understand differently as like people who work with magic, people who do witchcraft. You can do good things with that, or you can do bad things with that. And now we recognize all of those people who use that as witches. Whereas before, witch was only used negatively. And still today, like I said, people are still afraid of the word witch and the term witch, and are afraid to identify that way because of this negative connotation that we have, because of things like this person commenting all these things. Like, to my understanding in all of my research, witchcraft has always meant negative things. Yes and no. Like, I don't understand how you can do all of this research and not come across the fact that no, that's not the only thing that that means, and it was very specific to the languaging of a culture. So this example they gave, in Norse Germanic culture, for example, a vulva was not a witch, okay? In today's understanding, we might say, yes, they were. Yes, they were. People just didn't use that word for them because they liked what they were doing, okay? It's just like nowadays, when you don't like a person, you call them a bad name. And that name or that word or whatever it is, in some instances, in itself, originally, was not even a bad thing. It's all about how you say it, what you're saying when you call someone a bad name. There are some words that have been used negatively that have also been used positively in other cultures. And another really good example of this, I actually just saw, my partner and I were just watching I think the most recent series of Game of Thrones, and there was a scene, like right after I had gotten this comment and decided to do this video, there was a scene where they're like walking to the meeting and someone says to another person, and you don't need to know the whole context really, because I don't even know the whole context. I've just been seeing parts of it because we've been watching it. Anyway, someone says to another person, you basically, like, you imprisoned me, or you like sent me off, you let me become a prisoner to that witch. And the person they're talking to says, like, corrects them and says, she's a priestess. There's a small distinction. And that's a perfect example, because that just goes to show, like, one person, because they're looking at her in a negative light, called her a witch. The person who respects her calls her a priestess. Now, the difference today is that a lot of us choose the word witch as our identifier, and it means the same thing. I actually recently did a video about priestess versus witch, and, you know, what do I think is involved in the word priestess, what do I think is involved in the word witch, and how do those things go together in my path and in my identity, because I identify as a priestess and a witch, and I think that they are slightly different things, but they definitely go together. That's a perfect example. So I would argue, and again, I don't necessarily have all of the historical background to go with it, but the way that we understand witchcraft now, the way that we understand magic now, and that we understand that it's something that anyone can use, and you can use it for whatever your personal aims are, and you can choose to do woeful, baneful, harmful stuff with it, or you can use it to improve your life and the world at large for positive ends, that it's all witchcraft. With that understanding in mind, I feel totally comfortable saying, and this is what a lot of us do believe as our lineage as witches, is that all of those people, not just women, though many of them were women, but all of those people historically who did healing work, who did positive magic to help the crops grow and to help the livestock survive the winter and to help people survive the winter, and, you know, any of that stuff, we recognize that those people were witches. But in a culture and in a time not unlike now, where people thought witches were negative things, they went by different names. They were called healers, they were called priestesses, they were called wise women, they were called wart-cunning folk. They were called different things, but they were the same people. We are the granddaughters, the grandsons, the grandchildren of the witches that they were unable to burn. You may have seen that sentiment around the internet. And that's what we mean, is a recognition that those people were doing the same work that we're doing now, and we are using a word that they could not. Because most of the time, we can get away with it a little bit more than they could, and we're bringing back that power that they had and saying it's okay to identify as this. It's okay to say that you are this. We understand that it does not all mean the negative stuff, because we don't just use it as a negative term. But hey, I'm just a practicing witch who identifies as a witch, who knows a lot of other witches who practice and identify as such. What do I know? So I googled vulva and satyr woman, and I know I'm probably pronouncing those a little bit off, but here's literally what's in the Wikipedia article. Satyr, and again I know there's different, better ways to pronounce this, terminology comes from words meaning soothsaying, sorcery, and one of the related words is witch. The Wikipedia article essentially describes them as practitioners of magic, and another word for that among the Old English words for practitioners of magic are Wicca or witch, which became the modern English W-I-T-C-H, witch. Satyr involved the incantation of spells. Practitioners were predominantly women, but also men. And these practitioners were religious leaders who invoked deities, gods, and spirits. They connect with the spiritual realm through chanting and prayer. And here's the kicker right here at the end. Viking texts suggest that satyr ritual was used in times of inherent crisis as a tool used in the process of seeing into the future and for cursing and hexing one's enemies. With that said, it could have been used for great good or destructive evil, as well as for daily guidance. Again, these are practitioners of magic. Magic is a tool. They could use it for good or bad. A vulva is a female shaman and seer in Norse religion. So shaman is another term for a different type of magic practitioner, but lots of witches also use shamanism. And it says that they have practices which encompass shamanism, sorcery, prophecy, and other forms of indigenous magic associated with women. And that they were not considered harmless. Using Freya as an example, she's not only a goddess of love and was the most skilled in magic, but also a warlike divinity who caused screams of anguish, blood, and death. And now that I've looked these up and I realize what the words are and like what they're associated with, I have friends who use these practices who are reclaiming witches, who are modern witches, who identify as witches, and do these practices. So again, these are just pretty good examples of basically what I'm saying, that they're different words meaning the same thing, that these are witches. They just might use different words at different times. Thank you very much for watching this video. Again, links to other stuff are in the description. Always check those out so you can follow me other places, find out what's going on, see when I post things on my Etsy shop that I've made. And also, if you're interested in learning more about witches who call themselves witches and reclaim that power, you may want to read up on the reclaiming tradition of witchcraft, which is a tradition that I have gotten involved with in the past few years and am in the process of becoming a teacher in. It's something that really calls to me, really feels like home. They are the tradition that does witch camps around the world, and I went to my first one 2 years ago, around this time actually, this time of year. So it's kind of a 2-year anniversary for me. I encourage you to read more on that if you like, and of course I will be talking about it all of the time because this is the kind of thing that you deal with when you're a witch who says you're a witch. And thank you very much to the person who left this comment and gave such great topic for conversation. Hopefully some things can be a little bit more clear for people now. I'll see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.